make a fly, or the worship band made a change on the fly this morning. We were going to sing Come As You Are as our last song, but in singing My Chains Are Gone, there was a line in that in particular that struck me in the same way, and I thought it might be a good way to kick us off this morning, and the word that the Lord put on my heart to share with you. One of the lines in that song, My Chains Are Gone, is that I've been set free. My chains are gone, I've been set free. But now what? That's not in the song. But now what? What happens to us once we've been set free? You think about someone who maybe has been incarcerated. What happens when they are set free? They're not all of a sudden stepping right into a life that's already prepared for them. They maybe have been rehabilitated, or maybe they've had an opportunity to change their heart and their mind. Maybe they have opened themselves up to the Lord and asked for a different way. I don't mean to get real political this morning or get into something controversial. I just mean to speak very humanly, because there are humans involved not only in jails, not only on staff on jails, but also in the courtrooms that send people to jail, right? And there are people in police positions and law enforcement. There's humans, fallen humans in all positions in the chain that lead from somebody being free to being not free prior to them being free again. And I say that, I point that out this morning because when you're dealing with us humans, you're dealing with a possibility of failure and flaws. So some that are in prison, we must accept. We hope not. Oh, we hope not. We pray not. But we must be prepared to accept the reality that some may be there wrongly. Some may be there because of a mistake that occurred somewhere through the process. So when we think of those incarcerated, we have a number of reasons to pray for them. We have a number of reasons to pray that God will forgive them if they are repenting. If they are still hardened, that He will soften them. That He will somehow present Himself to them even in incarceration in a way that they have never heard or seen Him before, and take that opportunity to change, just like those of us on the outside seek the opportunity to change, right? That's what we're singing when we say, I've been set free. My chains are gone. My chains that have bound me to sin. My chains that have bound me to a way of life that's not been fruitful or helpful. My chains that have kept me from being maybe who I wanted to be, but certainly who God has called me to be. Those chains are gone when we accept Him. And we're set free. But now what? We're invited to come as we are. And how wonderful of a blessing that is. God doesn't expect us to get our lives all cleaned up first. Just like we don't expect, hopefully, someone coming out of jail to have gotten all things worked out in their lives so when they step out, they're perfect human beings. I fear that sometimes we expect that. And we forget that that's not the expectation we want on ourselves. Once we have repented and asked for forgiveness, we're not just instantly cleaned up. We're not just instantly made perfect and whole. We need an opportunity to work on that, don't we? Maybe I'm talking to some exceptions. Maybe you were already made, but yeah, I knew I was talking to one exception. He was up here just a minute ago. Made perfect instantly. The rest of us have got to work at it. The rest of us come just as we are, and we need assistance. We need help. We are turning from where we've been, but that's not the end of it. When I physically turn, it involves me no longer facing the direction I was facing, but what happens? What has to happen in my facing when I turn? I have to face a different direction. I have to start a new way of living. And that involves learning, and that involves grace, and that involves teaching, and that involves other people. Our passage that we have been studying for the last couple of weeks speaks to this morning. We're in Acts chapter 2, and I invite you to turn there. If you brought your Bible with you, whether it's electronically or in print, we're in Acts chapter 2. We're at the end of the chapter. And in particular, we're looking at verse 42 this morning. Acts chapter 2, verse 42. Our chains are gone. We've been set free. Once we've repented, once we have asked for God's forgiveness, once we have turned our way, we've turned it from some other way, some other God, some other influence, some other factor, something else that has captivated us and frankly influenced us and maybe even led us in our way of living, has changed us. But again, we're going to something else. And so the question is, to what? What are we going to? Just before verse 42, the people who had heard Peter speak so convictingly, the people who had responded to what he had challenged them and had repented and had asked for forgiveness of their sins. Verse 41 says, those who believed what Peter said were baptized and were added to the church that day. And then in 42 it says, all the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. Now we talked last week about devoting. Being devoted is like being dedicated. It's being committed. It's determining and deciding to put in the hard work. Day in and day out. The hard, often not glamorous, often time-consuming and difficult, slogging through the mud, walking uphill both ways. It's tough. It's tough study. It's tough challenge. There are good times. There are peaks we hit, but then there are valleys. But we commit ourselves. We devote ourselves to what? To 4 things. Now, I asked you 2 weeks ago, actually. I gave you homework 2 weeks ago. Do you remember? Those of you who were here. I assigned you some passages to read. Acts. Corey's not here to help us this morning. Acts 2, verses 42 through 47. Have you been reading them? The right answer is yes. I hope if you haven't, you'll make a point to do that today and write yourself a note. Start reading these verses. Get them. They are packed full of information. And in verse 42 that we're looking at this morning, we answer the question, devoted to what? The believers devoted themselves. They dedicated themselves to what? To this new way of living. But what way of living? What does it look like? What does it look like for you and what does it look like for me? Your life here and now. What happens when we get out, if you will, of the way we were living? What happens when the change, whatever they look like in your life, are gone and you don't want them back? What do you want put in their place? What are you hoping to step into? Something temporary? Something that is filled with an emotional high that's awesome, that just charges you up, that is exciting. Oh, and it makes you feel wonderful. And then in a few hours, it's gone. That's what we're looking for? Of course not. But, friends, let me tell you what I know you know, but maybe don't think about. Unless we adopt a new way of living, a whole new way of living, that's what our religious experience amounts to. When our practice of our faith is nothing more, that sounds, wow, let me change that. When our practice of faith is only coming to a worship service one time a week, then no matter how good it is, no matter how great the worship is, no matter how much maybe the message speaks to you personally, no matter how much you enjoy seeing your friends, and we do, no matter how good you feel to be a part of something, it's gone in a matter of hours. And I know that because no preacher is ever going to get an answer to this. But if you asked yourselves, or I had some magical way of doing a survey and you didn't have a choice but to answer it, and then I had all the answers in front of me to the question, how many of you remember the title to my sermon last week? Just last week. How many would say, yeah, I know what it is. I got it right here. Here's the title. Or maybe anything meaningful about it. I hope you hold on to something. But the reality is, we spend a lot of time listening to sermons. And we spend a lot of time coming and trying to gain from a worship service. But what do we remember? And if we don't remember it, and we don't get it again until next Sunday, how realistic is it for us to think we're going to change? How realistic is it to think that when we've turned, we're going to have something new that fills out all of life when we're only participating 1 hour out of a whole bunch? Right? So we have to step into something new, a whole new way of being. And that's what this passage is talking about. These believers who devoted themselves to 4 things. The apostles' teaching, which represents Jesus' teaching to his special ones called to pass on what he taught. And those disciples that were close to them, that learned directly from them, which amounts to our what we call the New Testament. That's what is meant when it says the apostles' teaching. The New Testament. And you know, if you study the New Testament at all, the New Testament refers often to the Old Testament. So studying the Old Testament informs our understanding of the New Testament. So we're talking about the whole Bible. But even if you just started with the New Testament, this is the apostles' teaching, and they devoted themselves to it, because if I'm going to live a whole new way of life, well, somebody's got to teach me. Somebody's got to help me know what that looks like. I'm looking at Rob out there this morning, and I'm thinking of the theater. And I'm thinking even of the children's theater. But an adult theater is the same way. When you go in to act in a theater, you're acting out a part that isn't just your normal self, right? You're playing a character. You're stepping into a different way, and you're trying to do it so authentically that the people who are watching believe you're actually that character. How did that happen? Because Rob and Jen invited them to come, and they said, hey, we're going to do this play. And it's called such and such. Okay, go for it. Go ahead. Oh, that's all right. I don't mean to intimidate you. Here, I'll come sit down. All right, go ahead. Not happening, is it? Well, what do I say? Well, where are the words? Well, how do I act? Well, what did that character do? There's all sorts of stuff you got to learn. Thankfully, that can all be learned in one practice, right? Here it is. Read over it. Yep, you got it? Okay, go for it. No, good grief. How ridiculous for us to even think that. And yet, how many of us, maybe unwittingly, look at our faith practice and we think that's the way it's going to happen. We think I'm automatically going to learn this whole new way of being by hitting it every once in a while. Hitting and missing. We think that I can just dabble in it a little bit and my whole way of being will change. No wonder so many of us get set up for failure. No wonder so many of us struggle with it. Man, the plays we enjoy, the theater that we go back and pay high dollar for, those are the plays where those actors have immersed themselves in it for a long time. They've read and reread, right, Rob? They've immersed. They didn't just read the material. They also got together with the other actors and practiced so they could watch and experience the way the whole operates together. Because if I'm in the play and I'm acting in this way, and Jim's also in the play, and Jim and I are never together. He's doing his thing, and I don't have any idea what he's doing. I mean, I have some idea, but I don't get to see how he's practicing, and he didn't get to see how I'm practicing. We don't talk to each other. and so on and so on. And then we all get together the day of the performance. What do you think it's going to look like? Ugh. I'm asking for my money back. Right? So what does it mean for us as Christians when we don't really immerse ourselves in not only the teaching, but the fellowship? That's a churchy word. How about the common life, the doing life together, the coming alongside each other and encouraging and teaching and holding accountable and listening and doing life together. This new way of life, according to the teaching. The apostles' teaching, which is what? Right? And if you've ever been in a play, if you've ever really stepped into a different character, you probably also spent some time trying to understand the culture and the mindset of the character. What did he or she think? How did they feel about stuff? What did other people around them? What was going on in that culture in that day? What was important to them? All these things are in that, and I'm just scratching the surface, and I'm really hoping I'm not botching it. You can tell me later, Rob. He hasn't walked out yet, so I'm not doing too badly. But you know what I'm talking about? I mean, this is to be halfway successful. I'm not talking about the top of the top. I'm talking about just halfway successful. We got to apply ourselves if we're going to be authentic characters in a theater. Well, if we do our best at it, we had to have learned how to do it, the teaching of it. We had to have practiced it together ongoingly. We had to immerse ourselves in understanding the culture and the mindset and the feelings, not just the behaviors. We probably had to spend some time either meditating or praying or just thinking really hard. Oh, I gotta get this. Now there's a couple of other things Christians do. In our walk, we remember the key thing about being a Christian is that when you've turned from that life, no matter what life it was, any other life, the focus is on me and getting ahead to this life where the one who defined it gave up his life, right? He gave up his life. It's a little hard to be all about your life when you give it up. It's a whole different way of being. And the best way for us as Christians to remember that and to really get it in us is by celebrating communion. Because in that very act, we remember what he did for us. It reminds us on a regular basis, oh yes, that's the goal. Oh yes, that's the whole reason I'm doing what I'm doing. It's incredibly important that we do that, and we're going to begin to do that on a regular monthly basis. More on that later. Then there's a fourth thing. And in fact, I would argue and am presenting to you today is the most important of all of these, at least in terms of order of priority. You got to start with this. Because the truth is, unlike a play, if I'm going to be successful in the theater, I've told you what I need to do. But rarely am I going to have somebody opposing me. I doubt very seriously that there's ever been a gathering of actors that have had somebody right in the middle of them arguing with them the whole time and resisting them the whole time and telling them, hey man, it'd be better if you just did it all this way instead of that way. You'd be a lot more successful. This play would be a lot better. Forget what the writer said. Let me tell you what it looks like here. Right? What kind of goofy play would that look like? We have to stay connected to the one who wrote the play. And that's through prayer. In fact, as Christians, when we turn from this way, all about me and self, which is another way It speaks in the Bible oftentimes, and again, language that's earthly, worldly, right? About meat worldly. To this way, which is his way, which is also spoken of in language in the Bible of maybe heavenly. Because we believe God is in heaven. That's what heaven is. It's where God is. And so if we as Christians are going to be turning from earth to heaven, but not yet, then I'm somehow supposed to be a heaven and earth person. Right? Because if Jesus came to teach us how to live this life, then that means we've got to be heaven and earth people. Folks, that's what prayer is about. That's what prayer is. Prayer is heaven and earth people stuff. Let me explain that to you. What does that mean? That means I'm speaking to and I'm listening from heaven to get how I'm to be on earth. And I'm taking what I'm doing on earth and the challenges and the struggles and the difficulties, and I'm going back to talk to heaven to say, yeah, but this is what I'm dealing with. What do I do now? What do I need to get? What do I need to hear? That's what prayer is. And if I'm going to be successful in any of these other things, I've got to be communicating to the one who designed it, the one who empowers it, the one who directs us and informs us. That's what prayer is. That's it. That's what prayer is. There's not a big mystery or secret to it. But am I wrong? Prayer is hard work. We struggle with prayer. Again, don't answer me. Don't hold your hand up. Don't nod. You don't have to respond. I'm not looking to put anybody on the spot. But let's be honest. How many of us are committed prayer warriors? Let me ask you a real question. You can respond to this one. Do you know a prayer warrior? Do any of you know someone that you'd say, oh yeah, let me tell you something. If I'm in trouble, that's who I go to for prayer, because I guarantee you it goes up to heaven. Do you know somebody like that? If you do, raise your hand. We got to get into prayer, folks, and prayer is tough work. Prayer is hard because we've got an enemy who doesn't want us to pray. That enemy lives inside of us. That enemy is called tiredness. I know you haven't experienced that before, so let me tell you about it. When I try to pray, it is amazing how quickly I go to sleep. I haven't slept. I haven't been able to sleep good in weeks. All I got to do is pray. Okay, I'm going to get really serious, Lord. I'm going to really pray. Man, it's about like for me riding in a car. That's good sleep.
While you're driving?
Riding in a car, Jim. Different than driving. It is. You know that's the truth. That's why we're snickering under our masks about it. Prayer is hard work, puts me to sleep. What else do you do when you pray? What else goes through your mind? Everything. Randy, right on, man. I looked at you because I knew Randy had the answer. Everything. Stuff I haven't remembered, junk that I've forgotten, lists. Oh my goodness, man, I can list and list and list. It's amazing. 5 minutes is all I need in prayer.
Mostly everything you did wrong.
Yeah, everything I've done wrong. Yeah, and everything my kids have done wrong. Everything. Our minds just take off. The imagination, the memory, everything just takes off. It's crazy. How successful are we in praying when we're asleep? How successful are we in talking to God when our mind's everywhere but? Prayer is hard work. Okay, that's the message. Goodbye, good luck. Hope it goes well for you. Thank you, Pastor. Yeah. That's why we need each other, folks. That's why we need to be in prayer together. That's why we need to gather as a group to pray together regularly. And that's why we got to get to know each other. Because I can tell you, my prayer for DJ looks a whole lot different when I understand what DJ's dealing with. My prayer for DJ is a lot less difficult to remember when I've looked in his face as he's told me what he's dealing with. And I've listened to the tone of his voice. And in this case, I've seen the way he got to me to tell me. I don't need a lot of prompting to remember. Our gathering helps in prayer unbelievably. But we got to commit to it. Really. We've got to make time in our schedules. Because then when we go, we're praying still, even though we're apart. And it's like we're together. And that has something to do with heaven coming to earth. The challenge for us in this new way of life, this common faith, this common way of living, this common family, this common teachings, it's like we're becoming different people altogether. It doesn't happen accidentally. And I'm asking you this morning, I'm inviting you this morning, I'm challenging you this morning. I'll beg and plead if that's what it takes to get you to hear this is the best life ever. I'm telling you that. I've lived it. But this is what we got to do to get there. I said I've lived it because I'm still living it. I've lived it and I've had those mountaintop experiences and I thought, this is it. That's great. I got it. And then before I realized it, I was back in the valley. Because I took it for granted. We got to keep doing it, folks. We got to keep doing it together. When you read this story, if you believe it's real, and I encourage you to ask yourself that question, do I believe this is real? Do I believe this many people followed this quickly? Do I believe this many people changed their lives to step into a new way of living? If it's real, then it must be possible for us. But this is what it takes. It won't happen easily. It won't happen overnight. But if we commit ourselves and we ask Him to bless us with empowering grace, then it can happen. If we pray, God, I'm in the desert. Whatever your desert looks like, I'm in the desert. And to get out of it, I need your help. That's our prayer. That's our prayer. Whatever desert I'm in, Lord, lead me. Lead me up your mountain.